A thick fog hangs over an ancient marketplace. Merchants are whispering, coins are clattering, and somewhere in the shadows, a quiet invention is about to rewrite human history. No one knows it yet, but the world is standing on the edge of a financial revolution so powerful it will spark empires, topple kings, and ignite wars. It all begins with a simple problem: gold is heavy, silver is scarce, and trust is fragile. For thousands of years, trade relied on metal. But as kingdoms grew and merchants traveled farther, carrying treasure became incredibly dangerous. Bandits lurked on every road, rulers taxed everything that moved. Ships sank, taking fortunes with them. Humanity needed something new, something safer, lighter, and much more powerful. And it started somewhere in ancient Mesopotamia, in a small temple courtyard, where scribes pressed marks onto wet clay tablets. These weren't prayers, they were promises. A farmer storing grain would get a clay receipt, a trader depositing silver would get a written guarantee, and soon these receipts started to travel from hand to hand, market to market, until people realized something astonishing. The receipt itself was becoming more valuable than the treasure it represented. This was the seed, the spark, the beginning of an idea that would shape all of human history. But the real explosion came thousands of years later. Florence, 14th century. The cobblestone streets echo with the sound of carts. Guilds are rising, merchants are traveling, and real money is flowing like blood through a growing economy. At the center of it all stands a family whose name would one day be spoken with both brilliance and fear: the Medici. They created something the world had never seen before: a bank that could move money across cities, nations, even continents, without transporting a single coin. It was a bank built on trust, secrecy, and perfectly written ledgers. A bank so powerful it could literally decide the fate of kingdoms. But the true revolution happened in a small office, hidden behind heavy wooden doors. There, a Medici clerk recorded something deceptively simple: a double entry. One number owed, one number owned. A perfect balance between risk and reward. This quiet stroke of ink allowed businesses to grow, ships to sail, and armies to move. It turned merchants into millionaires and cities into financial superpowers. Money was no longer just metal, it was information. And information is power. But with power comes danger. As the Medici expanded, kings realized something chilling. These banks had more influence than their thrones. When the Pope needed funds, he called the Medici. When monarchs planned wars, they begged bankers for loans. And suddenly a question was whispered through every palace corridor: who truly rules the world? The kings with their armies, or the bankers with their books? The line blurred, and soon it snapped. Fast forward to the 1600s. Sweden's King Charles XI is facing a crisis. Metal shortages, inflation, and chaos have pushed his nation to the brink. So he supports the rise of the world's first true central bank, the Statkunbanko. But what happened next would shake all of Europe. The bank created paper notes based on deposits of copper. At first, it felt like magic. Trade boomed. The economy soared. People felt richer than ever. But then, copper prices fell. The bank's deposits shrank. And suddenly, the bank had issued way more notes than it could actually bag with metal. For the first time in modern history, money became dangerous. The panic that followed was a terrifying glimpse of the future. A world where money could multiply faster than resources. A world where trust was fragile and fear could collapse entire nations overnight. This pattern repeated itself again and again. In London, 1694, England was at war with France and the crown ran out of gold. Desperate, they turned to a group of wealthy merchants who offered a bold exchange. Let us create a bank. We will lend the government money, and in return, you will let us print notes that everyone must accept as currency. This became the Bank of England, the institution that would anchor the British Empire, control global finance, and inspire every central bank that followed. But the deal came with a hidden cost, a cost the world would pay for centuries. Because now, money was no longer tied to metal. It was tied to debt, government debt, war debt. The more nations fought, the more money they printed. Money had finally escaped the physical world. It became an idea, fluid, powerful, and totally uncontrollable. And once it was released, it could not be tamed. By the 18th century, banks were issuing far more notes than they held in gold. By the 19th century, speculation grew into a full-blown mania. Railways, canals, new companies, everyone was borrowing, everyone was investing. Money expanded like a balloon stretched thin under the sun. And then came the pops, the crashes, the panics, the panic of 1873, the panic of 1893, the panic of 1907. Each one was a brutal reminder that when fear spreads, money evaporates. People would rush to banks only to find the vaults empty. Fortunes vanished overnight. Governments staggered. The truth was undeniable. Modern money carried the seeds of its own destruction. And then the world reached its breaking point. World War I began, and nations abandoned the gold standard to print unlimited cash. Armies needed weapons, and weapons needed money. The central banks provided it without limit. Inflation roared across continents. Debt soared to impossible heights. Entire empires collapsed under the weight of invisible numbers. But the true catastrophe happened in Germany. The year was 1923. Families woke up to discover the price of bread had doubled overnight. Children played with stacks of worthless banknotes. A wheelbarrow full of cash couldn't buy a single meal. People were burning money just to stay warm. Money, a creation meant to solve human problems, had turned into a monster. A force so powerful it could erase life savings, destroy governments, and push entire nations into desperation. And from that desperation, something much darker was born. Extremism, hatred, war, all because the world had lost control of its own invention. The system that started with a clay tablet in an ancient temple had now become a global engine, one that could create prosperity or chaos with equal speed. But even after 2 world wars, even after depressions and crises, the story wasn't over. A new era began in 1971 when the United States officially ended the gold standard once and for all. Money became pure abstraction, digital numbers, promises, and trust. Today, trillions of dollars move around the globe at the speed of light. Banks create credit with the keys. Governments borrow more than ever before. And ordinary people like you and me live inside a system built on faith, a system that has almost collapsed 100 times. Yet despite all the danger, one truth remains. Money isn't the villain. Human nature is. Greed, fear, ambition, hope, these are the emotions that shape every financial crisis, every boom, every collapse. The first bank changed the world because it changed human behavior. It introduced trust and temptation, security and risk, order and chaos. And even now, the system that once nearly destroyed the world is the same system that keeps it running. We walk on the edge of a financial blade perfectly balanced between prosperity and disaster, innovation and instability. The same ideas that empowered the Medici, that lifted kingdoms, and that fueled wars still determine our future. Money is our greatest invention and our most dangerous illusion. The story that began thousands of years ago with a simple promise scratched onto a clay tablet. World War I erupted, and in the chaos, nations made a fateful decision. They abandoned the gold standard. Why? To print unlimited cash? Armies needed weapons. Weapons needed money, and central banks provided it without limit. Inflation roared across continents like a wildfire. Debt rose to impossible, staggering heights. Mighty empires, which had stood for centuries, collapsed under the weight of these invisible numbers. But the true gut-wrenching catastrophe happened in Germany. The year was 1923. Imagine waking up to discover the price of bread had doubled overnight. Children, not understanding what was happening, played with stacks of worthless banknotes as if they were building blocks. A wheelbarrow, overflowing with cash, couldn't buy a single loaf of bread. In the biting cold of winter, people burned money just to stay warm. Meat was cheaper than buying wood. Money, the very invention designed to solve human problems, had morphed into a monster. A force so powerful it could erase a lifetime of savings in an instant, topple governments, and push entire nations into the depths of desperation. And from that desperation, something far darker was born. Extremism, hatred, war, all because the world had lost control of its own creation. The system that began so simply with a clay tablet in an ancient temple had now become a global engine, one that could create unprecedented prosperity or unimaginable chaos with equal speed. But even after 2 world wars, even after depressions and crises that shook the globe to its core, the story wasn't over. Not even close. A new era began in 1971. A moment that would redefine money forever. The United States officially severed the last link between the dollar and gold, ending the Bretton Woods system once and for all. From that day forward, money became pure abstraction. It was no longer tied to anything physical. It was just digital numbers on a screen, promises between governments, and a fragile web of global trust. Today, trillions of dollars, euros, and yen move around the globe at the speed of light. Commercial banks create new money, new credit, with a single keystroke. Governments borrow on a scale that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. And we, ordinary people, live our entire lives inside a complex financial system built on faith, a system that has come to the brink of collapse not just once, but multiple times. Yet, despite all the danger, despite the recurring crises, one fundamental truth remains. Money itself is not the villain. Human nature is. Greed, fear, ambition, hope. These are the powerful emotions that shape every financial crisis, every market boom, every devastating collapse. Think back to that very first bank. It didn't just change commerce. It changed human behavior. It introduced the radical idea of trust on a massive scale. And with it, the temptation to betray that trust. It offered security and introduced systemic risk. It created order and opened the door to chaos. And even now, the very system that once nearly destroyed the world is the same system that keeps it running. We are all walking on the edge of a financial blade perfectly balanced between prosperity and disaster, innovation and instability. The same ideas that empowered the Medici banking family, that lifted kingdoms to glory, that fueled devastating wars, are still the ideas determining our collective future. Money is our greatest invention and our most dangerous illusion. It holds no intrinsic value. It is powerful only because we all agree it is. And that story, the one that began thousands of years ago with a simple promise scratched onto a clay tablet, continues today. It continues every time we borrow for a home, save for the future, spend on something we love, or dream of a better life. Because in the end, the world isn't shaped by money. It's shaped by the people who believe in it. Thank you for watching. If the story made you think, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world.